station floated in the darkness of space like a city made of metal and light. It was massive. Millions of beings from dozens of worlds lived and worked inside its curved walls. Ships came and went every hour, carrying goods from one end of the galaxy to the other. The air inside smelled different in every section. Some areas had the sharp tang of chemicals. Others carried the sweet scent of alien flowers. And some places smelled like nothing at all, cleaned and filtered until they felt almost too perfect. Humans had only been part of the galactic community for about 50 years. In the long history of space-faring species, this was nothing. A blink, a heartbeat. The older civilizations had been traveling between stars for thousands of years. They had built empires, fought wars, and signed treaties long before humans even learned to make fire. To them, humanity was new, untested, unremarkable. Most aliens simply ignored humans when they passed them in the corridors. Some looked at them with mild curiosity, the way a person might look at an unusual insect. Others showed open dislike. They whispered behind their hands, wondering why such a weak and short-lived species had been allowed to join the Galactic Council at all. Lily Carter did not think about any of this. She was only 8 years old, and the galaxy was still full of wonder for her. She walked through the busy market on level 12, her small feet moving quickly over the smooth floor. Her brown hair was tied back in a simple ponytail, and she wore a faded blue jacket that was slightly too big for her. It had belonged to her mother once. Now it belonged to her. The market was her favorite place on the whole station. Stalls lined both sides of the wide corridor, selling everything from glowing crystals to strange fruits to tiny machines that floated in the air. Aliens of all shapes and sizes moved through the crowd. Some were tall and thin, with skin like polished stone. Others were short and round, covered in soft fur. A few had no solid form at all, drifting through the air like colored smoke. Lily loved to watch them. She loved to imagine where they came from and what their homes looked like. Sometimes she made up stories about them in her head, giving them names and families and adventures of their own. Her father, Ben Carter, ran a small cargo ship called the Dusty Road. It was not fancy. The paint was chipped in places, and some of the lights flickered when you walked too hard on certain floors. But it was home. It had been home ever since Lily's mother died 4 years ago, when Lily was still too young to remember her face clearly. Ben was a good father. He worked hard to give Lily a safe life among the stars. He taught her how to read star charts and how to fix a broken fuel line. He told her stories about Earth, the planet they had left behind, where green forests stretched for miles and oceans covered half the world. Lily had never seen Earth herself, but she dreamed about it sometimes. Today, Ben was busy with a delivery. He had told Lily to stay near the market and not wander too far. She had promised she would be careful, and she had meant it. But the station was so big, and there was always something interesting just around the next corner. She found herself on an upper level, away from the crowded stalls. This area was quieter. The lights were dimmer here, and the walls were plain gray metal instead of colorful tiles. Lily realized she had walked farther than she meant to. She turned to go back. That was when she bumped into someone. The impact was soft, barely a tap, but the reaction was immediate. A hissing sound filled the air. Lily looked up and felt her heart jump into her throat. 3 stood before her. They were young, probably teenagers by their species standards, but they towered over her small frame. Their skin was covered in dark green scales that caught the dim light. Their eyes were yellow and slitted, like a snake's. Each of them had a row of small ridges running from their foreheads to the backs of their necks. They were warriors. Everyone knew that. Their entire culture was built around strength and dominance. They respected power above all else, and they had little patience for those they considered weak. The one she had bumped into looked down at her. His name was, though Lily did not know that yet. He was the son of a diplomat, raised to believe that his kind were the natural rulers of the galaxy. Humans, to him, were barely worth noticing. "Watch where you walk, soft skin," he said. His voice was low and rough, like stones grinding together. Lily took a step back. "I'm sorry," she said quickly. "I didn't mean to." The other two laughed. It was not a kind sound. "She speaks," one of them said. "I didn't know they could." Tilted his head, studying her the way a predator might study prey. "You are far from your herd, little human. Where is your guardian?" Lily swallowed hard. She wanted to run, but they had formed a half-circle around her. The way back to the market was blocked. "My father is nearby," she said, trying to keep her voice steady. "He'll be looking for me." Smiled, showing rows of sharp teeth. "Then perhaps we should help you find him. Come." He reached for her arm, but Lily stepped back again. Her shoulders touched the cold metal wall behind her. There was nowhere else to go. Other aliens passed by the entrance to the corridor. Lily saw a merchant glance in their direction, then quickly look away. A pair of traders did the same. No one stopped. No one helped. Humans were not important enough to protect. Lily felt tears building in her eyes, but she blinked them back. She would not cry. Her father had taught her to be brave, even when she was scared. She wrapped her fingers around the small pendant hanging from her neck. It was a tiny silver star, the last gift her mother had given her before she died. She held onto it tight and tried to remember how to breathe. They moved closer, their shadows falling over her like dark clouds. Leaned down until his face was only inches from hers. His breath was hot and smelled like metal. "Your kind does not belong here," he whispered. "You crawled out of the mud only yesterday. You should have stayed on your little blue rock." Lily pressed herself harder against the wall. Her heart was beating so fast she could hear it in her ears. And then, somewhere behind her, something moved in the shadows. The movement was small. A shift in the darkness at the far end of the corridor. Lily did not see it, but she felt something change in the air around her. The cold fear in her chest became something else, something warmer. Did not notice. He was too focused on the small human girl in front of him, enjoying the fear in her eyes. His two friends stood on either side, blocking any escape. They were young and proud and certain of their power. The galaxy had taught them that strength was everything, and they had never met anything that could challenge them. "Your species is weak," said, his voice dripping with contempt. "Soft bodies, short lives. You need machines to survive in space. You cannot even breathe the air on most worlds without help." Lily did not answer. She kept her back pressed against the wall and her fingers wrapped around her mother's pendant. The silver star felt warm in her palm, as if it was trying to comfort her. One of the other laughed and poked her shoulder with a clawed finger. "Look at her, she cannot even speak now. Perhaps she has forgotten how." "Perhaps she never really knew," said the third one. "I have heard that humans are barely smarter than the animals they keep as pets." Nodded slowly. "Yes, I have heard this too. They bond with lesser creatures because they cannot survive alone. It is pathetic." He reached out and grabbed Lily's arm. His grip was not gentle. His scales were rough against her skin, and his claws pressed into her flesh just enough to hurt. Lily gasped but did not cry out. She thought of her father. She thought of the stories he told her about humans on Earth, how they had faced terrible dangers and survived. How they had crossed oceans and climbed mountains and built cities in the harshest places. Humans were survivors, he always said. No matter what happened, humans found a way. She held on to that thought like a lifeline. "Let go of me," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it did not shake. Blinked. For a moment something flickered in his yellow eyes. Surprise, perhaps. He had expected her to cry or beg. He had not expected her to speak up. Then his surprise turned to anger. How dare this tiny creature defy him? His people had conquered worlds. His ancestors had fought in wars that lasted centuries. And this small, soft, fragile thing thought she could tell him what to do. He tightened his grip on her arm and pulled her closer. "You do not give orders, human. You are nothing. Your whole species is nothing. You are here because the council took pity on you, nothing more." Lily winced in pain but kept her eyes fixed on his. "My father says every species has something special, even the ones that seem weak." Laughed. It was a harsh, ugly sound. "Your father is a fool. What could humans possibly have that we do not? You have no claws, no armor, no venom. You cannot see in the dark or hear across great distances. You are not faster or stronger than anyone. You are average at best and pathetic at worst." The other two nodded in agreement. They had never questioned these ideas. Their culture had taught them from birth that physical strength was the measure of all things. Species that could not fight were not worth respecting. Lily thought about her father's words. She thought about Earth, the world she had never seen. She thought about all the stories she had heard about humans and the creatures they had shared their planet with, dogs and cats and horses, animals that had lived beside humans for thousands of years, animals that had worked with them, protected them, loved them. And then she heard it. A low sound, so deep it was almost below the range of normal hearing. It vibrated through the metal floor and walls like a distant earthquake. The lights in the corridor flickered once, twice, 3 times. Froze. His grip on Lily's arm loosened slightly as he looked around, trying to find the source of the sound. "What was that?" one of his friends asked. His voice was not as confident now. "Nothing," said quickly. "Probably just the station's systems, old machinery." But his eyes kept moving, scanning the shadows. There were predators. They had survived on there by being aware of every threat, every danger. And right now, something deep in his brain was telling him that he was not the only predator in this corridor. The sound came again, closer this time. It was not a growl exactly. It was something older, something that had been shaped by millions of years of evolution on a world full of danger. Lily felt the tension in the air ease just a little. She did not know why yet, but she was not as afraid as she had been a moment ago. Something was coming, something familiar. Released her arm and took a step back. His friends did the same. They looked at each other, confusion mixing with the first hints of genuine fear. "Show yourself," demanded, speaking to the darkness. His voice was meant to sound commanding, but there was a slight tremor in it now. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then from the shadows at the far end of the corridor, 2 points of light appeared. They were not bright like lamps or screens. They were softer, warmer. They glowed with a faint golden color, like embers in a dying fire. Eyes. Something was watching them from the darkness. Lily felt her heart skip a beat, but not from fear. She knew those eyes. She had known them her whole life. The eyes moved closer, and slowly the shape behind them became visible. A form emerged from the shadows, walking forward with a calm, steady stride. 4 legs. A long body covered in thick fur, black and tan. Pointed ears standing straight up. A mouth that could smile or snarl depending on the situation. It was a dog. But to the who had never seen such a creature, it was something else entirely. It was a monster. The animal stopped beside Lily and stood perfectly still. It did not bark or snap or show its teeth. It simply stood there, its golden eyes fixed on with an intensity that made the young scales ripple with instinctive fear. Lily reached out and placed her small hand on the dog's head. His fur was warm and familiar under her fingers. "Good boy, Max," she whispered. Max did not move. He did not break eye contact with the threat in front of him, but somewhere deep in his chest, a low rumble began to build. A warning. They stared at the creature beside the human child, and for the first time in their young lives, they understood what it meant to be prey. Max was not an ordinary dog. He was a companion unit, part of a program that humanity had developed in the early days of space travel. Scientists had taken the ancient bond between humans and dogs and made it even stronger. They had enhanced the animals with better senses, faster reflexes, and longer. They had given them implants that allowed them to track their bonded humans across entire stations and ships. But the scientists had not created the loyalty. That had been there all along. That had been there since the first wolf sat beside the first human fire, thousands of years ago on a world that most of the galaxy had never heard of. Max had been with Lily since the day she was born. He had watched over her crib. He had walked beside her when she took her first steps. He had slept at the foot of her bed every night, keeping guard while she dreamed. When her mother died, Max had stayed close, letting Lily cry into his fur until her tears ran dry. He was more than a pet, he was family. Now he stood between his girl and the creatures that had frightened her, and every fiber of his being was focused on a single purpose: protection. Stared at the animal with wide eyes. His scales had turned a lighter shade of green, which happened to when they were afraid. He did not understand what he was looking at. The creature was smaller than him, weaker than him. It had no claws worth mentioning, no armor, no venom. By every measure used, it should not have been a threat. But it was. There was something in the way it stood, something in the stillness of its body and the steadiness of its gaze. The creature was not nervous or uncertain. It was calm, controlled, ready. Had seen warriors look like that before battle. He had seen predators look like that before a hunt. But he had never seen it in an animal so small, so seemingly harmless. "What is that thing?" one of his friends whispered. The question was directed at no one in particular. Did not answer. He could not take his eyes off the dog. Some ancient part of his brain, buried deep beneath layers of civilization and culture, was screaming at him. It was the part that remembered what it meant to be hunted. The part that knew, without words, when something dangerous was nearby. Max's ears were pointed forward. His body was relaxed but ready. He breathed slowly and evenly, watching the three with patient intensity. He did not move, did not make a sound beyond the low rumble in his chest. He simply waited. Lily kept her hand on his head, drawing comfort from his presence. She was not afraid anymore. How could she be afraid when Max was with her? He had always been there. He would always be there. "This is my dog," she said quietly. Her voice was steadier now. "His name is Max." Forced himself to look at the human girl. "Your dog." "Yes, he takes care of me." The concept seemed to confuse the young. On there, animals were either predators to avoid or prey to eat. The idea of forming a partnership with another species, of trusting it with your life, was completely foreign to them. "You let this beast guard you?" asked. There was disbelief in his voice, but also something else. Curiosity, perhaps. "It follows your commands." Lily shook her head. "He doesn't follow commands. He protects me because he wants to, because we're family." The word hung in the air between them. Family. It was a word that meant different things to different species, but somewhere beneath all the differences, it always came back to the same core idea: love, loyalty, the willingness to sacrifice for another. Max had all of these things. He had them in abundance. And right now, they were all focused on keeping Lily safe. One of his friends took a step backward. He had seen enough. Whatever this creature was, he did not want to test it. The other friend followed quickly, putting more distance between himself and the strange animal. Stood alone now, still facing Lily and Max. His pride told him to stand firm, to not show weakness in front of a human child and her pet. But his instincts told him something different. His instincts told him to retreat. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Max did something unexpected. He turned his head slightly, just enough to look at Lily. His golden eyes softened and his tail gave a single, gentle wag. It was brief, barely noticeable, but it changed everything. The monster was not a monster at all. It was a friend, a companion, a guardian. And somehow, that made it even more terrifying. Because realized in that moment that this creature would never stop. It would never give up. It would protect this child until its last breath, not because it was programmed to, not because it was commanded to, but because it wanted to, because it loved her. They had no concept of this kind of bond. They respected strength and feared weakness. They understood dominance and submission, but this was something else entirely. This was loyalty without limit, love without condition. It was beautiful and terrifying all at once. Took a step back, then another. His scales slowly returned to their normal dark green color as the distance between them grew. "This is not over, human," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. It was the kind of threat that someone makes when they have already lost but cannot admit it. Lily did not respond. She just stood with her hand on Max's head, watching the retreat. When they were gone, swallowed up by the shadows at the far end of the corridor, Lily finally let out a long breath. Her legs felt weak, and her hands were shaking. The fear she had pushed down was rising up again now that the danger had passed. She knelt beside Max and wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face in his warm fur. He stood steady and patient, letting her hold onto him for as long as she needed. "Thank you," she whispered. Max turned his head and licked her cheek once. It was his way of saying that she was welcome, that he would always be there, that nothing would ever hurt her as long as he drew breath. In the distance, voices began to echo through the corridor. People were coming. The confrontation had been noticed. But Lily did not care. She was safe. Max was with her. And somewhere deep in the station, the story of what had happened was already beginning to spread. The crowd gathered slowly at first. A few curious merchants stopped to look down the corridor. Then a group of dock workers joined them. Then more and more, until the entrance to the maintenance passage was packed with aliens of all kinds. They had heard the sounds. They had felt the strange vibration through the floor. And now they saw something that most of them had never witnessed before. A human child standing calmly with her hand on a four-legged creature, while three young backed away with fear in their eyes. The whispers spread quickly. "What is that animal? Where did it come from? Did you see the way they ran?" Among the crowd was an elder named. He was tall and thin, with smooth gray skin and four arms that moved with careful grace. His species was known for their love of knowledge. They collected stories and histories the way others collected gold or power. Had studied hundreds of species across the galaxy. He had read about Earth and its strange inhabitants, but reading about something and seeing it were two very different things. He watched the human girl with deep interest. She was small even for her species. Her clothes were worn and simple. She looked like nothing special at all. And yet when she stood beside that animal she seemed somehow larger, stronger, more complete. The creature itself fascinated him even more. It was clearly a predator built for speed and endurance. Its senses were obviously sharp and its body was ready for action. But there was no aggression in its stance now. No threat. It simply stood beside its human, calm and watchful. Had never seen anything quite like it. Then through the crowd, a voice called out, "Lily!" The human girl turned. Her face, which had been tense and tired, suddenly brightened. "Dad!" Ben Carter pushed through the mass of aliens, not caring who he bumped or shoved. He was a man of average height, with brown hair starting to go gray at the temples and lines around his eyes from too many years of worry. When he reached the corridor, he dropped to his knees and pulled his daughter into a tight embrace. "Are you okay? Are you hurt?" His hands moved quickly, checking her arms, her face, her shoulders. "I'm fine," Lily said. "Max was here." Ben looked at the dog and let out a breath of relief. "Good boy, Max, good boy." Max's tail wagged once, acknowledging the praise, but his eyes remained focused on the crowd. Too many strangers, too many unknown threats. He would not fully relax until Lily was safely back on the ship. Ben stood and faced the gathered aliens. His face was calm, but there was steel in his eyes. He had dealt with situations like this before. Not exactly the same, but close enough. Humans were often targets. They were new, they were weak by galactic standards, and they were easy to bully. He spotted and his friends trying to slip away through the crowd. They had recovered some of their courage now that the dog was not focused on them, but they still moved with the quick, nervous steps of creatures who had been shaken. "You," Ben said, pointing at. His voice was not loud, but it carried. "Come here." Froze, he looked at his friends, but they offered no support. Slowly, reluctantly, he walked forward until he stood a few meters from the human man. "What happened here?" Ben asked. Straightened his spine, trying to recover his dignity. "Nothing. We were simply having a conversation with the child. A conversation that required you to grab her arm hard enough to leave marks." The crowd murmured. Several aliens craned their necks to look at Lily's arm, where faint bruises were already beginning to form. Scales flushed a darker green. "Shame this time. It was. I did not mean to." "You did not mean to hurt her, or you did not mean to get caught." The young had no answer. Ben took a step closer. He was shorter than smaller in every way, but he did not seem smaller. There was something in the way he carried himself, a confidence that had nothing to do with physical strength. "My daughter did nothing wrong," he said quietly. "She bumped into you by accident. She apologized, and you cornered her like she was prey." His jaw tightened. "Do not." "I don't care what do or don't do." Ben's voice remained calm, but the steel in it had grown sharper. "If you have a problem with humans, you can bring it to me. You can challenge me, insult me, fight me if that's what your culture demands. But you will not touch my daughter again." The silence that followed was heavy and thick. Then another figure pushed through the crowd. He was older and larger than, with scars on his scales that spoke of many battles. This was his father, a decorated officer in the military. He looked at his son with an expression that mixed disappointment with confusion. Then he looked at the human man, the human child, and the strange animal that stood between them. "What is the meaning of this?" demanded. Ben met his eyes without flinching. "Your son frightened my daughter. Her companion intervened, that's all." Studied the dog with obvious interest. "This creature, it is yours." "It's hers," Ben said, nodding toward Lily. "They've been bonded since birth." "Bonded?" The word seemed to puzzle. "You mean it is trained to protect her?" "No," Ben said. "I mean they love each other." Stared at him for a long moment. The concept was clearly foreign to him, just as it had been foreign to his son, but was older and wiser. He had traveled to many worlds and seen many things. He knew that the galaxy was full of mysteries he did not understand. He looked at Max again. The dog met his gaze without fear, without aggression, just steady, patient alertness. And for the first time in his life, wondered if they had been wrong about humans. He turned to his son. "Come, we will discuss this at home." Hesitated, glancing at Lily one last time. Then he followed his father into the crowd, which parted quickly to let them pass. When they were gone, Ben let out a long breath. He put his hand on Lily's shoulder and gently guided her toward the corridor entrance. "Let's go home," he said. Lily nodded. She was tired, more tired than she had ever been, but she also felt something else. Pride, maybe, or hope. She had faced something scary and she had survived, not alone but with Max beside her. As they walked through the crowd, the scholar watched them go. His forearms were folded across his chest, and his ancient eyes were thoughtful. He had just witnessed something remarkable. Not a battle, not a display of power, something much more rare. He had witnessed proof of a bond that transcended species, language, and culture. A partnership built on trust and love, carried from a small blue planet to the farthest reaches of space. He needed to write about this. The galaxy needed to know. The story spread across station within hours. By the next morning, it had reached the news networks. By the end of the week, billions of beings across the galaxy had heard about the human child and her strange guardian. The station's security cameras had captured the entire confrontation. Someone had leaked the footage, and it had gone viral almost immediately. The images were everywhere. A small girl standing against a wall, three surrounding her, and then the dog emerging from the shadows like a ghost. Alien commentators studied the footage with fascination. They slowed it down, zoomed in, analyzed every frame. They tried to understand what they were seeing. "Look at the way the creature positions itself," said one expert on a popular network show. "It places its body between the child and the threats. This is not trained behavior. This is instinct." "But instinct for what?" asked another commentator. "Why would a predator protect something weaker than itself?" No one could answer the question. The concept was too foreign, too strange. Most species in the galaxy valued strength above all else. The strong survived and the weak did not. That was the natural order of things. But humans, it seemed, had found a different path. The scholar worked for 3 days straight, barely stopping to eat or sleep. He researched everything he could find about Earth and its animals. He read about wolves and dogs, about the ancient partnership that had begun when humans were still living in caves. He learned about horses that carried warriors into battle, about cats that guarded grain stores, about birds that hunted beside their human partners. The more he learned, the more amazed he became. Humans had not conquered their world alone. They had formed alliances with other creatures, building relationships based on mutual benefit and, eventually, mutual love. They had turned wolves into dogs, wild horses into loyal steeds, fierce hawks into hunting companions. They had created bonds that lasted generations, bonds that were passed down from parent to child like precious heirlooms. And now they were bringing those bonds into space. Wrote an essay and published it on the Galactic Network. He called it The Bonded Ones. In it, he argued that humanity's greatest strength was not their technology or their adaptability or their clever minds. It was their ability to connect, to form relationships that transcended biology and logic, to look at a dangerous predator and see not a threat but a friend. Other species dominate their worlds, wrote. Humans befriended theirs. They did not conquer nature, they partnered with it. And this partnership has made them something unique in the galaxy, a species that does not stand alone. The essay spread even faster than the video. It was translated into hundreds of languages and shared billions of times. Beings who had never thought twice about humans suddenly found themselves reconsidering. On the High Council held an emergency meeting. Was there, speaking about what he had witnessed on the station. He described the dog and the way it had stood beside the human child. He talked about the look in the creature's eyes, the calm certainty that had made him, a decorated warrior, feel like prey. "We have underestimated these humans," he said. "We saw them as weak because they do not have claws or armor, but they have something else. They have allies that will fight beside them, not for payment or territory, but for love." The council debated for hours. In the end, they issued a quiet statement acknowledging that humanity might have been judged too quickly. It was not an apology, did not apologize, but it was as close as they would ever come. Across the galaxy, other species began to look at humans differently. Some reached out to form new partnerships. Others watched from a distance, curious about this strange race that had emerged from an unremarkable planet on the edge of nowhere. And on the dusty road, life went back to normal. Ben guided the ship away from station, setting a course for the next delivery. The stars stretched out before them, endless and full of possibility. The old freighter hummed softly as it moved through the void, carrying its small crew toward another adventure. Lily sat in the cargo hold, surrounded by crates and containers. The space was not fancy, but it was comfortable. She had set up a small corner for herself, with blankets and pillows and a few books she had collected from various ports. Max lay beside her, his head resting on her lap. His eyes were half closed, and his breathing was slow and steady. He was at peace here, in this place where his girl was safe and nothing could hurt her. Lily stroked his fur gently, watching the stars through a small viewport. She did not know about the essay or the videos or the discussions happening across the galaxy. She did not know that billions of beings were talking about her and her dog. She only knew that she was home, and Max was with her, and everything was okay. Ben appeared in the doorway, a cup of tea in his hand. He looked at his daughter and smiled. "You were brave on the station," he said. Lily shrugged. Max was there. "I know, but you didn't panic. You didn't scream or cry. You stayed calm until help arrived. That's not nothing, Lily." She thought about it for a moment. Mom always said that humans are survivors, that we find a way no matter what. Ben's smile grew a little sad, a little proud. "Your mother was a smart woman. She was the best." He walked over and sat beside her, careful not to disturb Max. For a while they sat together in silence, watching the stars drift by. "Dad," Lily said finally. "Yeah. Do you think Max knows how important he is?" Ben looked at the dog, at the gentle rise and fall of his chest, at the ears that twitched even in rest, always listening for danger. "I think Max knows exactly one thing," Ben said. "He knows that you're his girl and he'll protect you forever. That's enough for him." Lily smiled and leaned her head against her father's shoulder. Max's tail wagged once in his sleep, as if he was dreaming about running through green fields under a blue sky. And somewhere across the galaxy, other species looked at humans with new eyes and wondered what else they had brought with them from their little blue world. What other bonds they had forged in the long years before they reached the stars. What other miracles of loyalty and love were waiting to be discovered. The humans were new to the galactic stage. They were small and soft and short-lived, but they were not alone. They never had been. And maybe, just maybe, that was what made them special.